All right, it is time for film goals check-in or update. They both work. They work. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you this video. This is going to be me sharing how my film goals have gone so far. I have made progress on 2 of my 5 film goals. I've done a film goals video, which I will link up above and down below if you would like to check it out. I have made progress in seeing some films. Actually, I've made progress in 3 out of my 5 goals. 3 out of my 5 goals, because I've seen some new films, which is what I'm working on to sort of try and figure out what are the films that I love now. I did rewatch the first film in the Fast and the Furious series, and I also will give you an update on how my data entry is going in terms of making a list of all of the films that I've ever seen. Actually, I made a sizable amount of progress, and I think that's because I filmed last week and I knew I was going to do a check-in, and it just, when you start working on something, you get more excited about it, and like when you share it with other people and then like there's conversations about it, it just like creates some really good energy. So thank you to everyone who commented on my film goals video. I really appreciate it. I loved hearing people's thoughts and if they had film goals and whether or not they had or hadn't seen the Fast and Furious series and what your favorite film was. And I'm really curious to see what my favorite film is going to be, because I did make this list at some point of a countdown, and I think we're going to do a little countdown. I was thinking about talking about those in individual films, individual videos, each of the films. I feel like that's a little too much pressure for me right now, and I think the best thing for me right now is to feel things that are less pressury, and so I think I'll just put them in these videos for now. So I saw 3 new to me films plus the first Fast and the Furious film, which was a rewatch. So what was the new films that I saw? The first one I saw was actually Friday Foster. This is a 1975 blaxploitation film with Pam Grier, Yaphet Kotto, Eartha Kitt, and Carl Weathers. I was like, is that Carl Weathers? And it's an early, because it must be I felt like it was early. Is he here? He's not listed here, and he had very limited dialogue in it, but it was wild to see him in this. So I actually quite enjoyed this, and this has like all of the, it's got all of the people, but I actually quite like this poster a lot. So I watched this on Canopy. I didn't think too much about it. I thought it looked good. I admit right now a lot of what's driving my choices for films is films that are shorter so that I can see more, and I think it was around an hour and a half. I can't quite remember. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy, so she plays a photographer who for a magazine that witnesses an assassination attempt, and then that sort of puts forward the energy of like mystery and intrigue and what's going on and figuring things out. Yaphet Kotto plays a private investigator, and one of the things that I enjoyed the most about this film is that I felt like they really acted like colleagues, that there wasn't any sort of like tension in terms of like a romantic connection, and they really he treated her very much on an equal level as two people in the same field that know each other. She kind of teased him a fair amount, which is interesting, but I felt that he didn't do that to her. It's interesting because when I read some reviews on IMDb, they referred to him as her boyfriend, and I'm like, I didn't pick up on that at all. Like I can understand where that came from, but like as you're watching the film, I'm like, I actually just felt like they were colleagues. It was one of my favorite things about the film, and I thought she was great. I love Yaphet Kotto. I've always loved Yaphet Kotto, like from Alien as well as Homicide: Life on the Street. I really, really do. And of course also Live and Let Die. I believe he was in the Live and Let Die. And so this was a couple years after that. And he's just such a wonderful presence, and he was great to see. And Pam Grier was great. I really enjoyed it. There are some things that I think one of the listings on one of the other reviews on, I don't usually read IMDb reviews, but I guess I just got curious about this one because I didn't know anything about it. And someone noted it was like blaxploitation for kids. And like, I wouldn't go that far, like, because like there definitely is some language that would require some explanation, and there is a fair amount of nudity. So, and I'm not making judgment on those things. I'm just saying it's not a PG film by any stretch of the imagination, but I really enjoyed it. I thought there was some good action. There was a fair amount of chase scenes. There was some practical effects, especially with cars and car chases. Very of the time and very of the like now we see things well lit even though it was night. It's not the case for films in the 70s, so it has a different look and feel, but I actually quite enjoyed it. So for me, this was quite a win. I would definitely watch more films with Pam Grier. I would continue to watch more films with Yaphet Kotto. It was really awesome to see Carl Weathers in this. A little unnerving because he plays not a nice character, which I am not used to, and always great to see Eartha Kitt, although her performance was way over the top, but very, very cool. There was also a pretty cool fashion show in it. But yeah, so Friday Foster, let me know, have you seen it? And then next up, I saw Leda from 2011. This is based on the Greek tale of Leda and the Swan. This is another one that I watched on Canopy. It was which if you're unfamiliar, Canopy is a service. It's a streaming service that's associated with libraries. I would highly recommend and check to see if your library has a connection with Canopy. Because for me, I get 8 free rentals a month and they have a wonderful selection. This is without question super art house, and Friday Foster is 1970s blaxploitation. So they have a wide range of classics and festival films and international films and genre films. They have a lot. So this one I just saw because on their banner ads of things that came up, they had an interview with the director, but it was on Letterboxd. I didn't end up reading it because I didn't want to get spoiled. But I do have to say with this one, I was not familiar with the tale of Leda and the Swan. So I didn't know the story. So this kind of felt like going to what I've heard people, my sister describes, my sister Jamie, I remember her describing going to the opera or the ballet. You actually want to know the story going in. It's not necessarily going to tell you the story. And that's how I felt watching this. And when I explained my experience of watching this, she's like, that sounds like it's going to the opera or a ballet. It's you should know it, or it's helpful to know it. And I didn't know it. And this, I will say, this was visually stunning. It's in black and white. And one of the biggest challenges I've had with it was though there was no dialogue. No dialogue. So you're interpreting the story completely visually, which is such an interesting choice. And it does require a lot of active engagement from the viewer to try and figure out what's going on. Because there were definitely moments where I'm uncertain whether this is reality. This moment, what we're seeing, is this reality? Is this a dream? Is this a memory? What's the timeline? What's the reality? Is it the future? Is it the past? Is this happening? Does the protagonist feel that this is happening? Is it actually happening? Does any of that matter? The reality portion of it, does it matter? And I didn't know the story of Leda in this one, which is quite heavy. And it's about Zeus posing as a swan. And some of the versions say to seduce, and but then the description of the film actually talks about sexual assault. So, but I did not pick up on that from watching the film. I didn't feel like there was assault in terms of Leda. So there was a swan. I will say my interpretation watching it, I thought she was the swan. There were moments where it really felt like she was the swan. So, yeah, so I don't really know where to go with this one in terms of I felt not knowing the story going in is something I am very used to. With film, with books, I am fine with it. I do feel like having some context for this one would have been helpful, and that's a risk that I take by the type of viewing experience that I like to have. Now, I would like to read the story or an interpretation of the story. I did find there is a one-page poem by... Keats, I think, that I found on Internet Archive. So I might read that. I did read some of the Wikipedia page on like the story and stuff like that. And this was really intense. Like I will also say that this was really intense considering those themes. Like I didn't pick up on all of those themes, but there is a young, like for me, I thought, okay, so there's this young woman. I don't want to get into spoilers, but it's like, you know, like it felt sort of like family drama, you know, a girl gets older, life stuff. It's definitely set, like, it's not set in, like, Greek mythology times. It's set sort of, like, horse and carriage, you know, times, like, pre-technology of, like, you know, that kind of, like, pre-industrial age, I guess, maybe. You know, you'd have to ride a horse to see a neighbor. There was a hunt at some point where a bunch of people on horses and a dog, so it felt British, like in that sense. So I don't know exactly where it was supposed to be set, but I do feel like it was definitely beautiful. Like without question, the cinematography was beautiful. The atmosphere was amazing. One of the things that I like to do is I do like to watch films that are based on sort of like atmosphere and texture, and this is without question a film that is the case. So that's actually, I think, one of my potential goals when I was like brainstorming goals is I want to see more films that are like atmospheric and it's about the texture of the films and interesting storytelling styles and unusual, and usually, you know, the broader term would be just simply art house, and it definitely is. But I do feel like I felt at the end of it, I didn't quite understand exactly what happened. Like there were there were some very, there were some disturbing moments without question, not the ones that the myth describes, but some other ones. But the visuals, the cinematography, and the makeups. There was a couple of makeup scenes that I was like, scenes where the makeup was really highlighted. Like, so, but overall, I didn't feel like I really enjoyed it. So that was surprising to me, because this tends to be like, without question, a type of film that I would enjoy. And I can't quite figure out what it is. Oddly, I gave these two films the same rating. For me, they were both 8 out of 10, like, without question. But I enjoyed Friday Foster more. And not that it has to be a sliding scale, but it's helpful for me to sort of determine what it was. And I feel like afterwards reading up on it, or the tale or whatever, and feeling like I misinterpreted something, made me feel not good, you know, like it made me feel like, oh, I was not a very good viewer if I couldn't pick up on that. But, you know, so, and I did also learn that for me, like art house films aren't always going to be, you know, a super win. But and I guess I'm also trying to figure out, like, how do I feel about watching it? I don't think I would rewatch it because it was a little disturbing. But I would like to know more about the story. So it was definitely an engaging experience, but it didn't it evoked a lot of emotion and feeling and tension, but it wasn't necessarily pleasant, and not every film is going to be pleasant. So anyway, so that's what I watched. That's one of the other films I watched. Another film I watched, again, on Canopy. This poster is not great, but they're not, okay, but I also watched Dead of Night. This is a 1945 anthology film, and I'm trying to say, this has it's not as easy to get it, but this has some good images from the film. And so it's kind of like a bunch of people at a party or at a house, and it has a framing device, but it's an anthology film in that they tell each other stories, and then there's sort of like a fade out, and then we see the story. And most of them have a sort of potential supernatural paranormal spin to it. So it's a bit of a thriller in that sense, sort of, not necessarily mystery, but it's a bit more of I don't know if it would be noir, maybe. I don't know I think the definition of noir is very narrow. So I don't know if it fits into that. But I did quite enjoy it. I'm actually really happy I didn't know it was an anthology film going into it, because I'm not the biggest fan of anthology films, because I feel like they're kind of like how people describe short story collections in terms of the fact that you're going to like some more than others, which means there's usually some that you don't love. and so I would have resisted watching it, and I really enjoyed watching it. And I'm sure I like some stories more than others, and because I've seen, it's like watching in a lot of ways, it's like watching a bunch of Twilight Zone episodes, but all together, like where they're told by people like at a party or at a gathering, and then it has a framing device, kind of like the Twilight Zone movie from I don't actually remember if the Twilight Zone movie from the 80s had a framing device, but I quite enjoyed it. There were some stories that were really kind of unnerving, for sure, and there were some effects that I found that were pretty good, and there were some moments I thought were actually genuinely kind of scary. So maybe it is more horror, but like horror feels different over the years, so I don't know if this is horror or thriller or what. But they're all tales of suspense. I guess that's a good one. That's what I wrote. Tales of suspense with the paranormal spin. Maybe I should just look at my own notes. Anyway, it was also in black and white, which I think is one of the reasons why I don't love this poster. I did figure out a lot of them because I've watched a lot of paranormal and supernatural stuff over the years. I think that's just part and parcel with just getting older and having the things that you like. But the ones but it was still like, I was curious. I'm like, oh, is it going to be this? Or, oh, is it going to be that? And there's still one that afterwards I was so convinced it was going to go one way that even when I realized afterwards that's not the result that they gave, I'm like, yeah, no, but I still believe that this was it. And part of it also was about belief. Do you believe that this thing happened? Do you believe the story that someone's telling you? I will also say that there was some outdated commentary on mental health. So there was a lot of people throwing around, saying, are you crazy? Are you cuckoo? Are you what? Like those kinds of things that I think the horror genre is unfortunately one where that's a lot of sort of like the explanation is that the person is crazy, or mentally. We have learned a lot and we have come a long way in terms of understanding mental health, but that does get thrown around a lot. This movie is also, 50, 70, 80 years old, so take that with that grain of salt. But I did end up really enjoying it, and it was it was actually a replacement pick because I was going to watch Hidden with Alexander Skarsgård, but I will watch that one. I don't know yet. It's some kind of thriller. It might be a post-apocalyptic. It's a small cast. It looks like just a 3-person cast mostly. And but it's so dark. The cinematography was gorgeous, but it was so dark and it was bright out. It was still afternoon and I couldn't see what was going on in the screen. So, and I tried it later and then it didn't work for me in terms of the timing. So I'm still going to work it in. So if you saw it in my Instagram poll, I like to do Instagram polls while I'm watching movies, asking people if they've seen the films. And so if you saw that I was watching it, that's what happened is I had to have a replacement. So Dead of Night being an older film and a black and white film and, mostly a well-lit black and white film, it was fine to watch when it was sunny out, but I couldn't make out the Hidden at all. So it didn't seem to be worth it. And wow, now I feel like I don't have tons of time to talk about the Fast and the Furious, but I'm like, I also don't know how much I have to say about the Fast and the Furious because I'm thrilled that I got around to watching it. It was a little later than I expected. My pace for this series, I think I'm going to try if I watch one every other week, I should finish by Halloween. But this one, oh my gosh. So this is from 2011 and I loved it then and I loved it now. And it's an action film about, it's so funny. I think until I rewatched it a couple years ago and I did a video about it, which I actually don't know where it is. It's not on my channel, so it must be on my computer. I never posted it because I didn't end up following up with the series when I was watching for Hobbs Shaw countdown, I think. Or was it F9? I'm not sure. Anyway, but what was I thinking about that? Oh yeah, I realized when I rewatched it intentionally, like eyes on screen, not just like having it in the background and watching the scenes that I really enjoyed. I realized when I watched it intensely, I'm like, wow, I actually do not necessarily know what the plot of this film is. And again, like kind of like with Dead of Night, I had these moments where I'm like, what is the plot. Like, not that there isn't one, but it's, for me, it's not the important part. The important part is the characters and the relationships. So the plot is to me is secondary. And there is a sort of, because Paul Walker plays an undercover cop, he's trying to infiltrate Vin Diesel's group of friends and coworkers and stuff who are street racers, and it's the story, the mystery sort of element of it is the cops are trying to figure out who are the people that are stealing a bunch of electronics and stealing from truckers. And so that's the plot per se. But for me, this is just about a group of friends and a group of but there is this mystery. I am horrible with like sort of espionage, so the whole undercover cop thing just throws me off. And so and the acting is, it's okay. It's fine. Paul Walker is like, he's okay, but I actually, when I watched it this time, I realized my confusion about his character actually probably means that his acting is better than I was giving him credit for, because he's undercover, so he's literally being a person who's playing a character. And so I don't know, or maybe I'm being more generous, I don't know. I don't really care too much because I just love this movie so much. The found family element, the group of friends element, is primary for me over the plot, over even all of the car chases and stuff like that. I'm not very good at car chases. I actually had to rewind the end of the movie because there was one part that was very quick, and I'm like, well, wait, what happened to that plot point? Like, what happened to that group, or what happened to that? And there is, I know, because I know where the series goes, that the next two films don't have this cast. So I'm not gonna find out updates on the cast for a while, or the cast, like the characters. So the cast of characters. So anyway, I feel sort of like a bit bad because I feel like I'm not talking too much about the film or whatever. But overall, I love it. Like, I just love it. There was one t-shirt content scene. So I did dock it half a star for that because I don't really need any of that. But overall, I'm going to do a little Fast and Furious countdown chart of what are my favorites. Without question, this is obviously it's the first one I watched, so it's in first place. So we will see when I watch Too Fast, Too Furious where it ends up, and then we will see if it matches up to my list from whatever year that's from. So that's how that's going. In terms of my data entry, I don't have too much to say. Oh, one thing I will say as a sort of habitual thing or habits thing is I do need to remember that one of the things that helps me get to watching movies is having a knitting project. And so while I was watching it, some of the movies I was working on a sock. Wow, this looks so huge. This feels like a sweater. Right, this feels way more like a sweater than a sock. Maybe it'll end up being a sweater. Anyway, but I did work on this. It doesn't look. I pulled out the yarn because it was I was using it, so I'm still working on the part that's very bumpy. But it's hand spun yarn from my aunt, and hand dyed too. So it's wonderful yarn. And so this is going to hopefully be a sock. I need to put in the heel at this point. I didn't make the pattern. Oh, it's a little bumpy. Oh wow, I'll get it. It's just for me. So I just want to get back in the habit to some knitting, and I want to get better at doing some sock patterns. So I need to have a knitting project on the go. That's something that helps me sort of settle when I'm watching movies and helps me just stay focused. Because I do find, because I haven't been watching as many movies, I get distracted. I, do my best not to look at my phone, but sometimes I do. And then but so it takes a while, and one of the things that helps is having something to knit. So that one I need to write out how to do the heel, and I also need another project that's much more just very like a sweater that's just around and around and around and around, or something like that, or a scarf that's a very easy pattern that I can just have a lot of knitting to do. Let me know if you're a knitter. Do you have a good project? What do you do when you need something that's going to take a long time? Because I feel like that's what I need. I need a simple-ish long time project. Usually I do a top-down sweater, but I think I've done 3 of them now, so I feel like, well, and I don't wear them that often, so I'm like, well, maybe I should do something else. So that's how my knitting is going. In terms of my data entry, I did finish my 2012 data entry. My goal was to finish that by the end of June, and I've already finished it, and I've also started on 2011, and I've done December. So I think I won't go into many details on that because this video is getting sort of on the longer side. I do have a fair amount of films left for 2011, and it'll be interesting. It's a year that's split in between, half of it's on Letterboxd and half of it's in Excel, and I'm putting it into Excel, and this is to work towards having my goal of the one and only list of all of the films that I've seen. I wasn't sure if people wanted to know what the current tally of films is, and because I'm really curious as to what the final number will be. So maybe I'll say what I have right now, and if you don't want to know, I'll see you in the next video. But if you do want to know, as of right now in my spreadsheet, my current tally, which is, I think it's 2022 down back to 2012 and a few from 2011, is 975 films seen, and with rewatches it's 1,179. So that's the number I'm currently working with. What I want to know is what my first time watches is, because that's all the movies that I've seen, but I have a mechanism to capture rewatches. So 975 movies are in my spreadsheet of films seen for the first time, and we'll see how the rest of 2011 goes in terms of more movies. So there you go. There is my wonky how my film watching update is going. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm doing my best to try to figure out what are good videos to do, so I hope this was an enjoyable format. I will try and firm things up and make it better as things goes on, but it's just great to be talking film again, and I will be back soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.